Hey, and welcome to another lesson together. Sweep arpeggios are an extremely difficult technique to get comfortable with. For a lot of years, it almost sort of seemed like sweep arpeggios were kind of mocked by a lot of folks in the guitar community, possibly seen as a cheesy technique by many, I have no idea why, and also maybe possibly just due to how frustrating it can be to learn. But as the electric guitar, a relatively young instrument, continues to evolve, the sweep arpeggio sound can be heard in a surprisingly diverse array of musical genres. Regardless of the application, guitarists, including myself, are often fascinated by the unique tone of sweep arpeggios, almost like a cool, bubbling sort of sound. I mean, if you've heard it, you know it, right? In this video, I'm going to aim to steer you into successfully adding sweep arpeggios into your bag of tricks. To do that, I'm going to give some specific practice guidance to get comfortable and, most importantly, accurate with your sweep arpeggios. Then I'm going to give you some unique and creative sweep arpeggio licks that underscore the advice I give you with varying degrees of difficulty. Beneath this video in the description, you'll see that there's actually chapters, so you can click, and if you want to go directly to the licks, or if you want to hear some of my specific practice advice, which I really suggest you do, but I know some people like to just check out the licks. So if you want to do that, there's links in the description box where you can do just that. Have fun. Enjoy, and if you like what you see, please consider dropping us a subscription, a like on this video, or even a nice comment. I mean, I love hearing from people, so please consider that if you like what you see here today. So tip number one is going to be, when you're learning sweep picking, find a technical approach that works for you and stick with it and focus intently on it. This video is not really an exhaustive resource on the really specific mechanics of sweep picking. I am going to show you my technique that I use to sweep pick very fast and very clean with no string noise. But there are other methods and approaches to sweep picking out there. And if you use one of the other methods, that's fine, but just make sure that when you're practicing, you're really focusing on intently doing it the same way every time. The reason this might seem kind of basic, but the reason I'm mentioning is it's very easy when you're practicing to kind of slip into old habits, and maybe for 10 minutes you're doing everything perfect and correct, as you intend. But then if you allow your mind to start wandering, your hands and your fingers are going to revert back to their familiar habits, and it can be kind of a little bit of a waste of practice time if you're not really focused on actually executing the technique in the way that you intend to. We'll cut to the other camera here and I'll show you how my hands look when I'm sweep picking. So just a really quick look at my right hand here. The two main things I would kind of point out is my lower thumb basically acts to mute the strings that I don't want to hear when I'm sweep picking. And then when I actually sweep pick, it's like an up and down, like my whole arm moves in that kind of stiff sort of way. And so it's not like a rotation of the wrist. I found this kind of causes problems when you're trying to get a nice sort of clear, punchy sweep picking tone. Like I said, you don't have to do it exactly like me, but if you're able to kind of anchor your thumb a little bit there and just kind of moving that straight, sort of stiff up and down sort of motion when you're sweep picking, helps you get a nice even tone and also helps you mute the strings that you don't want to hear. Tip number two, as you're getting into sweep picking, practice one-shot arpeggios as opposed to continuous sweep sections. And now that one-shot arpeggio, that's not like a technical term, that's just kind of what I'm kind of describing it. I'm just going to show you a little quick clip what I might classify as a one-shot arpeggio versus a continuous sweep section. So the premise here is a one-shot arpeggio is one that you just kind of do it once and then you keep on playing, other stuff on your guitar. Hey, it's easy to do something right once as opposed to doing it right 10 times in a row. So if you focus on one-shot arpeggios in the beginning, you'll find that's a little bit easier to actually translate what you're practicing into your music and into your playing. The other thing is that one-shot arpeggios tend to be pretty versatile, and pretty much no matter what style you're playing, you can throw one of them in there. So that's a cool thing to keep in mind too. Whereas the continuous sweep sections, I always kind of associated with a bit more like neoclassical rock, like that sort of style. Bit more of a narrow sort of niche there. Next tip I have for you is you really want to be aware of your finger independence as you're working on sweep picking. And this is one of those things where it's focus, focus, focus. Practicing sweep picking is a little bit different than practicing improvisation or something like that, where you can kind of use your feelings and vibe out a little bit more. With sweep arpeggios, you only want to have one note ringing at a time. I can't tell you how easy it is to accidentally kind of have two fingers down at once and the notes kind of blend together. It can be a really sort of subtle, tricky thing to watch out for at first. So you just got to focus, and just make sure you're truly only hearing one note at a time. Because when you get two notes at a time, it's not really a sweep arpeggio anymore. It's more of a chord. The good old-fashioned saying, start slow and build up speed, actually is pretty much a good way to approach this angle that I'm giving you here. Last tip I want you to keep in mind before we get into the licks is if you like the sweep arpeggio sound, use it musically as soon as you can. Don't have this mentality like you're gonna just practice sweep picking drills for a year and then just start using them all over the place. That kind of thinking is how you get guys that play in a very mechanical way and they're playing sounds like exercises. What you want to do is you want to start some simple sweeps that you can integrate with your existing skills already. It's going to sound really cool that way, and it's also going to be a much more natural progression. If somebody's following your playing, they can tell that you're kind of gradually working these sweeps in, and it'll make a lot more sense for your overall musical maturity if you do it that way. A couple little kind of tips within the tip here. There's ways that you can really squeeze the most out of your prowess with sweep arpeggios. Sweeping is kind of sneaky. For example, you can get a killer sound from an arpeggio if you only descend or only ascend. You don't always have to go up and down. Another cool trick is when you're playing an arpeggio, you can add a slide at the beginning or the end of the arpeggio to get more range. All right, everyone always says I talk too much, so let's get down to the licks, shall we? This first example is going to be a descending sweep arpeggio based on an A minor 7 arpeggio. It's going to be a little bit different because I'm going to incorporate a slide into the arpeggio to give a lot more range, and we're only going to be descending on this arpeggio. So it really is kind of takes some of those tenets of early sweep arpeggio practice into consideration to give a cool musical sounding lick. Let's try it out. To start this one off, I've got my pinky on the 15th fret of the high E. I'm just doing a pick and pull off action here. So that's a downstroke followed by a pull off. Then there's two upstrokes here. So down, pull off, up, down, slide down to the 9th fret. And that's your A minor 7 arpeggio. Then there's a little bluesy phrase just to kind of add some color there. Next up, we're going to have another 3-string, this time ascending arpeggio. It's going to be a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, which might seem a little bit sort of random. We're not really going to get too wrapped up in the theory here, but basically you're going to hear just like a blazing, quick arpeggio with some fast pentatonic runs just to give a cool, flashy sort of rock sound. Let's try it out. For this one, I'm on the 16th fret of the G string and I'm doing a downstroke, then a hammer on to the 18th fret, then another downstroke. Here's the sweeping portion where I'm going to downstroke the 17th fret of the B string, then the 15th fret of the high E string. So down, hammer, down, down. Then there's a cool little phrase, and so that section is a little hammer on from nowhere to the 17th fret of the B string. Then it's to finish the lick off. Next up, we're going to have an example of some 3-string arpeggio shapes sort of stacked up on top of another in a descending manner. And often it's easier to stack 3-string shapes on top of each other as opposed to really just working hard on 1, 5, or 6-string shape. So this is kind of where you combine shapes to create like a massive arpeggio, and this one's going to be based on a C sharp major 7 sharp 11 arpeggio. Really, it's just kind of like the Lydian mode is what we're hearing here. So this is going to have kind of a dreamy sort of sound. This was a fun one to record, so let's try it out. All right, on this one, we have 3 quick sweeps here, and there's to add color, there's a changing note at the top. So here what I have is I pick 20 on the high E with a downstroke, pull off to 15, and I'm doing 2 upstrokes to get the 17th frets of the B and G strings. I'm using a finger roll to get those 2 notes. In other words, it's my middle finger that gets both of them. We're not going to go super in depth into the rolling technique today, but it's basically, most of the time we use the tip of our finger to fret notes, but when you do rolls, The first note in the finger roll has to actually be more of the front of your finger. So this 17th fret of the B, I'm using more of like the fingerprint, if you will. And then to go to the G string, I actually sort of flip my finger over. And so when I go to the G string, I'm back to fretting with my fingertip like I normally would. So it's like down, pull off, fingerprint, roll, fingertip, if that makes sense. The next pattern is the exact same, but just the top note is the 19th fret instead of the 20th. So you have, but that sweeping is the same. That pattern is going to continue. Next, I'm going to pick 20 on the B and pull off to 17 on the B. I'm going to use a similar. So you have 20, then 19. The last arpeggio is me picking 21 on the G string and pulling off to 17 on the G string. Then doing a finger roll to get 17 on the D, then 19 on the A, and then a little sort of mysterious sounding melody to finish. This next arpeggio is going to be a really great one for finger independence. It's going to be another sort of A minor 7 type of arpeggio, or A minor 9 if we want to be really exact. Let's try it out. Fret of the D string, picking that note, hammering on with my pinky to the 10th fret of the D string, then the sweeping comes in, and I'm going from the 9th fret of the G, 8th fret of the B, 7th fret of the high E. I then pick the 8th fret of the high E with a downstroke. You could kind of use any direction, really. You could do an upstroke on that 8th fret as well. Then there's a pull off back to the 7th fret, and we're going to go back down the arpeggio. So that's going to be up, 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 and then a downstroke again. And we just start the whole pattern again there. Then to finish it off, I'm still outlining this A minor 7 chord, or A minor 7 arpeggio, just with these trills going up the neck. From the 8th and 12th frets in the high E, to the 12th and 15th frets in the high E, 15th and 17th frets the high E, and 17th and 20th frets. And then finishing with just a... This one is going to be outlining an A7 chord, dominant 7 chord, and it's going to have a few different positions that climb up the neck and then end with a slide and a melodic phrase. I find this one super fun to play, a little bit tricky, but try it out and see what you think. Hope you enjoy. 8 and 5 on the B string, and I'm picking with a downstroke, then using a pull off. Then it's an upstroke to get 6 on the G, an upstroke to get 7 on the D, and then a downstroke on the 5th fret of the D string. After I do that, I go right back up the arpeggio. So down, hammer on, down, down, hammer, and then I'm going to shift with a slide up to 10. So you have... Then it's going to be from 10, pull off to 8, 9 on the G with an upstroke, 11 on the D with an upstroke, downstroke on the 7th fret of the D string, hammer on back to 11, downstroke 9 on the G, downstroke 10 on the B, hammer on to 10, slide up to 14 on the B, same pattern, and then finish off one more slide up to 17 on the B, and that's going to be picking 17 with a down, pull off to 14, roll to 14 on the G. I'm going to do 14 on the D now, and then slide to 12 and 11 to finish the melody of the lick. Okay, that'll do it for today's lesson. Now, these are just sort of ideas to kind of get the gears moving on, your sweep picking efforts. So I really hope you enjoyed what you saw here. If you did, remember, and I apologize for doing it so much, but if you're so inclined, like, comment, subscribe, all that sort of good stuff. It's a huge help as we build this thing. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned. We're going to have more videos coming your way. 2022 is going to be a huge year with Electric Guitar Academy, so stay tuned. Cheers.